Shonen Jump manga get anime. That is simply a fact of life. Shueisha has too much money and knowledge about how much more money they could have for this not to be the case. If a manga eludes the Shonen Jump axe for long enough, it will get an anime. But they don't always look like this. The Elusive Samurai is an absolutely bizarre creation. It has all the ingredients to be popular. A unique setting based on real historical events, the end of the Kamakura shogunate in 1333, an interesting concept, a hero whose best skill is running away, and an established mangaka, Assassination Classroom's Yusei Matsui. And yet it sort of sits aimlessly in the middle of the pack in Jump. It's at no risk of being cancelled, but I also very rarely hear anything about it, good or bad. But of course, that was before it got an anime adaptation, before it got hundreds of thousands of new eyes on it to boost sales and garner attention. Anime can take series the average viewer has never heard of before and catapult them into nigh omnipotent status overnight. Just look what happened with Frieren and Apothecary Diaries last year. It also wasn't stuck in Hulu jail like its brethren Yozakura Family and Undead Unluck. So as long as the production was good, surely, this was the break that Elusive Samurai has deserved all these years now. Not quite. So it turns out the production wasn't good. It was great. It was legitimately one of the best looking shows from 2024. If you just love stylish animation, I implore you to ignore all of the waffling I'm about to do and just go and watch the first episode of this show. However, it grabbed some virtual headlines thanks to a handful of absolutely wonderful cuts, but that was it. It felt like people were more in love with the literal animation on the screen than anything the show itself was meaningfully doing. Why is that? Why is this series that has everything it takes to succeed not carrying any momentum? Ultimately, it's about dissonance. The Elusive Samurai operates in a peculiar middle ground between slapstick comedy and serious historical fiction, and in doing so forces the audience to have a tolerance for both. It will almost immediately alienate most viewers who are coming to this story for a grounded conflict, but also is so violent at times that it's not just a chill, funny watch. I imagine this is why it's such a polarizing manga. The type of audience that wanted to see a dramatic war story set in a real historical event probably isn't super happy with the sheer amount of jokes, let alone the magical realism and Team Rocket level goons that are many of the early villains. But you also can't recommend it to someone as a comedy, because there's plenty of stuff that's not comedic here. It's an adventure story with comedic elements. It just naturally feels like something you bounce off of unless it is distinctly a natural meld of things you enjoy. And it seems like a lot of people bounced off. Personally, I think the comedy is tuned just right, and it's also made abundantly clear early on what the tone of this story is. I'm very sensitive to when serious scenes get ruined by bad jokes, but I never really felt dragged out of the story by an ill-timed joke. But perhaps I had a more measured expectation of what I was being given. It reminded me of Naruto's comedy a lot of the time. It's often at the forefront, but when the show wants to get serious, it gets serious. And I say all of this as someone with very little experience with Matsui's previous work, Assassination Classroom. But from what I understand, it too operates in the seesaw of comedy offset with serious action. At the risk of grossly overgeneralizing, I wonder if this is also a situation where a series like Elusive Samurai is just naturally way more popular in Japan than it would ever be in the US. Gag manga generally do significantly better in Japan, and while I am interested in the historical grounding of the story, maybe 1333 Japan just doesn't grab an audience who has no interest in Japanese history. But all of this raises a different question. Does it deserve better? Does it deserve to be more popular? Yeah, I think so. The anime certainly. It's a fun, easy watch that looks great, and that's honestly becoming increasingly rare in the seasonal slate. As we touched on earlier, the building blocks are there. The setting and the premise are intriguing, even if the backbone is a revenge storyline, it puts its own spin on it. I like the main villain, I like the side characters, I like the hijinks. It's a good show. But notice I'm not saying it's a great show. I want this series to be great, and the best it's been able to show me is good. That is still an achievement, but I can't sit here and have this conversation without acknowledging the series has its flaws. The priest is definitely the first filter here. There's a real chance for you to find him grating almost immediately. especially if the comedy isn't landing. I enjoy Yuichi Nakamura having the time of his life playing Yorishige, but there's a good chance you're not as charitable as I am when it comes to watching voice actors have fun. While not as exciting, the performance manages to touch the realm of Mamoru Miyano in Zombieland Saga, where you can tell he's just having a blast getting to be this over the top. Also, Aoyuki remains the most versatile VA out there, to the point where I didn't even realize she was the voice of Gemba until checking the cast after the fact. She just does immaculate work voicing gremlins of any gender. Still, none of that context changed the fact that Yorishige is loud, in your face, and extremely goofy, often going at odds with the serious war story on display. I do think you can hate Yorishige and still have a good time here, but he is around quite a lot. What I really think makes or breaks the story, though, is how you feel about Tokiyuki. He is never annoyingly cowardly, and I really do like evasiveness as a hero's main skill. There's something particularly exciting about a main character who can't just brute force or power up his way through every obstacle. Add in a character trait where he goes absolutely insane when under duress, and you've got a nice recipe for some crazy action. Unfortunately, they don't quite land what I will charitably call the kink. Tokiyuki really enjoys when he's in danger, and as of now, it's mostly just kind of weird. It feels like an easy enough quality to turn into a negative. Maybe he'll overexpose himself to danger because of it. I don't know. I like the sicko energy, but right now maybe we tone down the excitement just a bit. Mostly because it's not his only characterization. He's a kind soul who is not overcome by revenge and is slowly becoming a better leader through the sheer love he has for his comrades. This is not original, but it works really well in this setting, especially when the main villain is a cold-hearted, traitorous psychopath. It's a really nice cornerstone for a story that could have gotten out of hand edgy quickly, but not the most overwhelming grab your attention MC, so I generally think how you vibe with Tokiyuki as a character will be how you vibe with the story itself. And of course, if the constant comedy and goofiness wasn't already a dead giveaway, the series itself is not particularly grounded. There is no magic system or anything that elaborate, but this is 100% a world where magic does exist. Yorishige really does have foresight. Main villains have superhuman strength, eyesight, hearing. It's generally specialized in some way, but what this means is Tokiyuki does have superhuman evasiveness. He's not just pretty good at running away. This is all fine and good, even if the story never truly explains this. Certain people are just special beyond human means, and that's it. It's something that on its own isn't a problem at all, but is just another straw on an increasingly strained camel's back. The story is interesting enough that it held my attention, but the production is absolutely the star of the show here. It's probably why this video exists at all. It's arguably one of the best adaptations of all of 2024 in the way it just completely elevates the source material. I've seen the match cut ball thrown around a lot as an example of the show's great direction, and it is indeed good direction, but it's also pulled directly from the manga. Where the production truly shines is when it's meaningfully building upon what's already there. The flashy chase sequence from episode 1 is a great example of this. There's a reason I used it to open this video. This is a cut that is essentially a single 2-page spread in the manga, enhanced to such a degree that seeing this clip online was actually what got me to start watching the series in the first place. The action is fluid and exaggerated, capturing the over-the-top violence that is the series' go-to. It is beautifully done, and even if the series itself fades from memory, this clip will surely live on inside Sakuga compilations and anime repost accounts. This continues later on in the season with the village defense and most importantly, the Tokiyuki house fight scene. If episode 1 wasn't your first exposure to Elusive Samurai's anime, then it was almost certainly the insane work they did for this fight. Again, just a handful of panels absolutely elevated to the highest order, really selling the flow state of elusiveness on display with buttery smoothness, while also being the best example of Tokiyuki being an absolute maniac. It's the most memorable fight from what has been animated so far, and really is indicative of the crazy heights this series can reach when it wants to. What really lands the show's style, though, is the background art. The backgrounds in this show are downright painterly. They give Frierin's backgrounds a run for their money and are 100% underappreciated in a show that doesn't quite linger on them in long shots like Frieren does. The colors are so vibrant and are accented so well by the bright red blood whenever it's used. Just wonderful work done by the entire team at Cloverworks to not only bring this world to life, but make it move and perform for us in such a genuinely beautiful way. Such incredible production that might be outdoing the manga? Look, Mal manga scores mean less than nothing, but they do usually self-select, with more dedicated fans willing to actually rate a manga on the site, especially for lesser-known series. So I was genuinely surprised when I saw Elusive Samurai the manga had a 6.6. It's only 3K ratings, so again, grain of salt, but the anime has a 7.82. And if we're getting anecdotal, I've found it pretty difficult to find copies of the manga out in the wild. While I was at my local Kinokuniya the other day, all they had was one volume, and it was volume 14. It's really put in this stark contrast, being placed next to 1 million copies of Dandadan as well. I actually started reading the manga while I was writing this, but I'm not yet past the content of the anime. If it does indeed have real certifiable issues like I've heard murmurings about, then maybe I'll make a follow-up video to handle that. Cross that bridge later though. And thinking on it, the anime got me to start reading the manga, so I guess in Shueisha's eyes, it was a success. No matter the public reception, we are still getting a second season of the show at some point. That much is already confirmed, and I'll be there to watch it. Hopefully at the very least we get a few more incredible cuts of animation for our efforts. I don't think Elusive Samurai was one of the best anime of 2024, but it was certainly in that second tier of short, fun shows you should absolutely give a chance if anything you've seen interested you. I mean, just watch the first episode at least. Even if the show doesn't connect, that is still one of the better episodes to come out last year. It's a good show, at least I think so, but I do think its moment to become another hyper-popular Shonen Jump property has sadly passed. If it didn't happen with this level of adaptation, it's just not going to happen. Perhaps the series was just a little too elusive for its own good. Hey there, thanks for watching. As always, I want to thank my incredible patrons for their support, and in particular Fate Steel Taylor, who was the first person to select the tier that forces me to record a special note for them in videos. Out of respect for their support, I will not mention what happened in the wildcard round of the NFL playoffs. Thank you.